Good morning, everyone. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us once more for a Hazards Out workshop. It's been a little while and it's now 2026, but we're really delighted to be able to keep this project moving forwards after having carried out several workshops last year. The main partners of this project, FAD, the European Waste Management Federation, ACR+, the Association of Cities and Regions for Sustainable Resource Management, and Hazardous Waste Europe, which is really defending the interests of the hazardous waste management industry, are really coming together to try and accompany the implementation of the mandatory separate collection of household hazardous waste. While last year we focused a lot more on the collection aspects and the governance aspects around collection, in this episode, we'll be looking a lot more at what happens then after collection and how is the waste management side dealing with this very specific waste stream. So our agenda today, we will see if we can actually completely follow this agenda, because our first speaker, Gabriel Chifflier, representing the International Solid Waste Association, is currently having some technical issues in trying to join this meeting. So I'm going to check if he can still join in the next couple of minutes. Otherwise, we will go straight then to our next speaker, which is Clément Leveaux, Sales and Marketing Director at Veolia, and following that, we will also then have Richard Kennedy, who is Managing Director at ISWA over in Ireland. And this will really give us a strong perspective on the industrial side of dealing with hazardous waste, and in this case, household hazardous waste. As usual with these workshops, following the presentations, we will open the floor to discussion. You will be invited to turn on your camera and microphone and raise your questions, raise your comments directly to the speakers. Obviously, you can also use the chat and the Q&A function. I will be keeping an eye on those and bringing up your comments and questions also throughout the conversation. Try and make it as relevant as possible for you. These are technical workshops, so I think everyone in this audience and the speakers are technical enough to be able to handle most of your questions. So really take the most out of this opportunity. I would also like to just mention that there's more than just webinars. Hazards Out is also trying to build a community of professionals dealing with household hazardous waste. We have a website, hazardsout.eu, where you have a lot of resources from previous webinars. And over the course of this year, we have two more workshops planned, one in June and one in October, where we'll be looking at citizen communications, and then a broader governance aspect around national waste management strategies involving then household hazardous waste as well. So I hope that you will be keen to continue to participate in our Hazards Out activities. You were over 130 to register for today's workshop. Obviously, a very, very strong interest from the waste management and recycling sector, but we also note some good interest from public authorities, national authorities, and also a few local authorities. So again, if you can also bring in your perspectives into this, that's also extremely welcome. We also have many different countries represented, 32, with a strong participation, well, from Belgium for sure, but also Ireland is our second country participating. So great to see the interest there. And again, national perspectives are very important. So whatever you can bring into this conversation, please do so. I see that Gabriel is, I believe, with us. Can we just check this? Because as I mentioned, we did have a little technical issue with Gabriel. So Gabriel, can you hear us okay? Can you turn on your camera? Can you unmute? Can you give us a little hello? I see you're on the screen with me, but I'm not sure you're connected. No. Okay. So as I mentioned, as we're struggling a little bit on the technical side with Gabriel, no, you're here. Okay, so I think we're almost there. Yes.
Finally.
Okay, now we're good. Okay, now we're good. So Gabriel, Vice Chair of the ISWA Working Group on Hazardous Waste. So Gabriel, because we couldn't have a quick chat before the meeting, so it's very simple. You have a take control button at the top of your screen.
Yes.
Yes, if you click on the take control button, you will then get a view of your slides and you will be able to click through at your leisure. Yeah? Okay, so Gabriel, sorry for the slightly, upside down introduction, but you go for it. ISWA has been doing a lot of work on hazardous waste, and we thought to start this workshop with a bit of an international overview of how to deal with this waste stream and some of the recommendations you're putting forward at ISWA level. So please, Gabriel, over to you.
Right. Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. Yes, indeed. I mean, just for everyone inside ISWA, so the International Solid Waste Association, we've got several working groups. One of them being, as you just mentioned, Jean-Paul, the hazardous waste one, but there's also the healthcare one, taking care of let's say everything related to the health sector, so hospital waste management indeed, but others, and we've got landfill group, etc. So in this case, effectively, inside the hazardous waste group activities in the last years, some of them have been related to some work concerning the household hazardous waste. So it's a subject that definitely attracts some attention in the last, I would say, 3 to 4, maximum 5 years, at least internally in this working group I mentioned. I don't mean, of course, that it might have got the attention of other competent authorities, administrations, and the waste management sector in general since longer ago. But at least in what's related to the hazardous waste group, this is there is a group of people inside the group. That has been carrying some investigation and work and trying to compare different systems, etc. So we will try to summarize that as best as we can and go directly into, let's say, the do's and don'ts of these interesting subjects. All right. So I'll move on. I was told by the organization that some of the subjects were already covered in some previous webinars. Above all, the definition of what is household hazardous waste, etc. So we won't, let's say, spend too much time, and I will go directly on the parts that I understand have not been covered so far. As well, there is my colleague Clément Leveaux coming after myself that will speak about transport collection, handling, treatment, etc. So some of the slides that I produced concerning this subject, I hope you also understand that I will jump pretty quickly on them so that Clément can speak everything in detail about them. All right. So, as I said, we will move on the definition or the description of what's household hazardous waste, because that has already been covered. We all know, of course, that it's chemical products and many other types because they're toxic, flammable, corrosive, reactive, etc., which would be the general definition. So I move on that, and I go directly on the regulatory and the policy context. It's true that before extended producer responsibility schemes appeared, we were, depending on the country, we were already taking care of household hazardous waste. But I would tend to say that the EPR schemes, without, let's say, entering and too much on the analysis of the good aspects or bad aspects of the EPR, if there would be some, they have definitely developed or extended. As well, extended is also part of the definition of the word itself, but they have extended, let's say, the management of household hazardous waste. either directly or indirectly. The motivations are different, of course. As everyone knows, extended producer responsibility is based on some particular types of waste that have particular types of management schemes for them to be properly treated. But I think that they have had an important positive consequence, I would say, on the way the household hazardous waste have been managed. I think they have increased their the management of them. We've got many different types of national hazardous waste regulations, which, of course, depending on the country, makes municipalities having different schemes, different obligations. So what we're trying to say here is that the motivations of managing household hazardous waste can come from different legal structures or legal frameworks. Effectively, there's also occupational health and safety requirements that are making them having to be managed properly, irrespectively sometimes of maybe extended producer responsibility schemes or not. So that also participates on the framework, on the obligations of managing them, and obviously environmental protection laws as a more general aspect. So a key principle, I think, to finish this slide, is that household hazardous waste must be managed separately from non-hazardous household waste. It's not always easy because many times they are mixed, and we will see that a little bit later, which creates a big issue for the waste management sector because of risks, because of dangerousness, because of accidents, etc., that occur because of that. But definitely, considering that a very important principle in a sound waste management scheme is that the sooner on the chain we are taking care of a problem, the better it will be. So, of course, if we can separate them at source, it will make the management easier and the cost lower, etc., etc. Okay, so I move on then on waste prevention and minimization. So, I mean, it might sound like common sense sometimes, or most of the times, by the way, but despite having to manage household hazardous waste, we should never forget, of course, some principles and reduce and minimize, because, of course, if we have less waste to manage, well, it will make it easier to manage it, of course. Then promote safer alternatives and obviously reuse and share. It's true that maybe sharing household hazardous waste, meaning household sharing chemical products, etc., it's not an easy thing to do. So I think it's more an interesting objective, but difficult to put into practice. But in any case, it's something to take into account. No doubt about that. So examples in terms of how to try to reduce, minimize, having safer alternatives and reuse and share. Definitely eco-labeling, because it will help to reduce and minimize if things are properly described, properly labeled, etc. Then having public awareness campaigns will definitely allow to the public in general to have a bigger awareness, and therefore having safer ways to manage, to handle, to store, to keep their household hazardous waste. And the reuse, of course, more than I share, because not to repeat myself, but as I say, sharing is a little bit difficult. I mean, sharing a pesticide or sharing a chemical product, it's not impossible, but life shows that it's not that simple. But definitely the reuse could be an important aspect on this point. Okay, so we go to proper segregation at source. what we said in two slides ago. Definitely, the sooner we segregate, the sooner we separate on the chain as much upstream as possible, it will obviously help and benefit everything else on the chain on the downstream. I mean, my colleague afterwards will explain a lot of that and will give a lot of examples and will show the consequences for the waste management sector of not having a proper segregation at source, and the difficulties that it causes, and the increases on the budgets that unfortunately occur because of the fact that the waste is more difficult and therefore more expensive than what it was forecasted in a yearly budget on this side of the story. So segregation, very important. Household hazardous waste must be identified and separated by household. So ideally, therefore, what we were saying earlier, campaigns, awareness campaigns, making sure that people at least know the difference between paints and resins and glues, and it's not people obviously don't have to be specialists and chemical engineers, but having a certain minimum of, let's say, general culture on this aspect will definitely help with the management afterwards. So consequences of poor segregation will be mentioned afterwards. I won't go deeper on it. Accessible and safe collection systems. I think this is probably one of the most important points, at least for me, in what the municipalities and administrations should concentrate, because I think that, I mean, obviously based on their budgets, and I know that there's always a lot of tension on this part, but definitely if the administrations are making it easier for a household to be able to deliver their out of date chemical products that they might have, or let's say the mostly finished bottles with maybe a bottom of chemical product left, etc., or contaminated packages, and well, you know, all these type of household hazardous waste that have already been defined and described in previous webinars, as far as I understood. If there are different options for households to be able to deliver it, and let's say at a relatively short distance from their neighborhoods, and avoiding having to take a car or a transport to be able to bring and therefore making maybe a weekly or every 2 weeks collection at every home, etc., or apartment building, is definitely something that we have already seen that in developed countries, at least, but it's something to keep developing. Because some countries have, for instance, what we call green points, where people are, let's say, going to deliver their household hazardous waste. But sometimes there are not enough green points, or they are difficult to reach, or the people again have to take their own car to be able to get there, and obviously that sometimes demotivates. But I mean, there is a balance to be found. Of course, it's not easy, but definitely this is an important point. Last little detail inside this slide is the retail take-back schemes. We've seen that, we see that with the mercury vapor lamps, for example. We see that with batteries. We see that with different types of, but definitely not all the products. I mean, I would just give an example, maybe giving an old paint can, for example. You cannot be many times delivered at the same shop where the household bought it. So that definitely makes it. Then they need to go to a green point. Maybe the green point again, it's too far, etc., etc. So this is definitely one of the main subjects to think about when trying to build up a household hazardous waste scheme. collection scheme, sorry. Safe storage and handling, I won't go too much into that because, again, this will be spoken afterwards, but definitely there has to be appropriate containers and labeling. Let's not forget that some chemicals are not compatible with some others, so therefore they shouldn't be stored in the same place, or at least at a safe distance, etc. So these are definitely things to take into account, but they will be spoken in the next presentation. Environmentally sound treatment disposal as well. This will be discussed by the next presenter, but prioritize just some big aspects that need to be taken into account. Prioritize recycling and recovery. That's not only for household hazardous waste. This is in general for the whole waste management sector. Use licensed facilities. It's obvious to say, but still important. We should use licensed facilities to treat in an environmental sound manner hazardous waste, and the system has to ensure a total traceability from cradle to grave. This is definitely the approach. The best approach of traceability is a cradle to grave approach, and being able to demonstrate every single movement of the waste from its generation to its treatment disposal. Do's and don'ts then from in terms of at least our experience, what we see do's for local authorities. Well, establish clear household hazardous waste strategies and policies. See what are they covering, what they're not covering. If they're not covering, what else is covering it? So, for instance, the start of we were speaking earlier about EPR scheme, extended producer responsibility schemes. So, okay, I mean, I'm taking care of this, but maybe we don't take care of this product. But then there is an EPR scheme. There isn't an EPR scheme. So, if there isn't, what happens with the waste then, etc. So that's very much. Very important to take into account. Provide accessible collection infrastructure. That's what we were mentioning it. Somehow we need to find a balance between what's possible and what's not, but at the same time, with the budget available, we should consider the possibility of making it as easy as possible for households to deliver their chemical products, their hazardous waste. Communicate clearly with residents what's possible, what's not possible, where should they deliver. Honestly, myself, even as a let's say an end user or a final consumer, I would tend to say that communication is we don't always have enough information of what's available for me to deliver my household hazardous waste. And very important, coordinate with producers and operators. In this case, I would tend to say more coordinate with operators for local competent authorities, because let's say households are a part of have definitely a level of responsibility, but at the same time, local authorities have to let's say be the link between, let's say, the upstream part of the chain, which we could say are the households, and the downstream part of the chain, which are operators. Don'ts for local authorities. What we would say is to not treat household hazardous waste as regular municipal waste, because obviously, whether we like it or not, both types of waste are treated totally differently, and therefore they shouldn't be treated and managed in the same way. Don't rely solely on voluntary participation, because that's let's say, if you allow me to say it this way, is a very optimistic approach. And sadly, we like it or not, human beings, we are like we are, and therefore it's good to expect a certain level of voluntary participation, but at the same time, there has to be a system, a structure that makes things managed properly. And don't underestimate communication needs. It's a little bit, as you've seen what we said on the left hand side of the slide. communicate clearly with residents. So as you can see, this is definitely the other side of the story. And don't underestimate communication needs. And do not ignore data collection and reporting. This is maybe something a little bit like more modern, we could say, or something that data intelligence has become something that definitely helps to improve. I would intend to say, more than seeing what's been done properly, which hopefully we should be already aware of that. It will definitely help us to maximize the improvements on what's not covered properly or being done properly. So data definitely becomes data collection and reporting definitely becomes a very important, and with the appearance of the artificial intelligence, etc. Of course, this is all related to it. I will pass this one because the do's and don'ts for waste management operators. Because again, my next the next presenter, I think will cover most of it. So I'll skip this slide, and then the last three slides we wanted to, let's say, reinforce some of the messages beside the take-home messages, which is the third slide out of these last three. We wanted to reinforce some of the messages that, as you've heard, we understand are important. Communication and public awareness, clear instructions to households. Again, I repeat, I was saying it. It's not always clear where can I deliver it, or where I'm delivering it, what can I and can I not deliver. If I'm going to a retail shop, maybe I'm expecting any kind of product, but in that shop it's only for mercury vapor lamps. In another one is only for batteries. In the pharmacies, I can only. It might seem common sense, but I can only deliver, of course, obsolete medicines and nothing else. So clear instructions to households to make sure that precisely we are shaping as best as we can what we were saying that is very important, the upstream part of the chain, because the better we segregate the waste, the better it will be managed, and or the more easily managed it will be down the chain. Simple visual guides and signage. I think that's it goes together with clear instructions, but still, it's the form of them has to be simple visual guides and signage, so that people are can easily, let's say, make their own segregation and correct segregation at source whenever they're delivering household hazardous waste. And then feedback to citizens on outcomes. I think that the word responsibility is a word that we many times use. I mean, we're all responsible of something or a part of the chain. But many times we are, let's say, not told what's working, what's not working, etc. So feedback to citizen on outcomes with reports, with maybe contamination that unfortunately is happening because for whatever reason we have not managed to find the proper way to handle this matter. It doesn't mean it's going to work, but it's part of the road to make it work. So definitely feedback on citizens on outcomes is an important point. And what are we looking for? Which are the, let's say, the positive outcomes that we would like, thanks to a good communication and public awareness? Well, better participation, definitely. Lower contamination, because lower contamination as a general term of, if I'm managing well or properly waste, well, then obviously there will be definitely less probability of having a spread of contamination. And above all, or last but not least, I would say, better to say, safer operations, because the waste will be better segregated, will be delivered where it should be delivered and not where it shouldn't be, etc. And that's also definitely an important part of it. Common challenges. So just last two slides. Low public participation, that's definitely a challenge. And therefore, communication and public awareness again is hopefully will fight this. Cost and logistical constraints. It's a challenge because it's what we said. I mean, if we try to make it very easy for household, obviously that should be the objective, to deliver their hazardous waste. But making it easy, meaning having a lot of collection points, which would make it easy, but that doesn't fit with the budget, most probably. So therefore, it's a challenge, and I think everyone in the sector realizes that, and the local authorities having difficulties to fit in their budget the best possible collection and logistical systems. That definitely is an issue. But still, and misidentification of household hazardous waste, that's what we said. I mean, if they are delivered in places where they shouldn't be delivered, if they are not correctly labeled, if there is not a good public awareness of it, etc., well, then there will be a misidentification of hazardous waste. If there is a misidentification of household hazardous waste, then the problem is that it will be more difficult to transport it, it will be more difficult to handle it, and it will be more difficult to treat it. And that's when also the budgets, the costs are increasing, and then the budgets that the administration have thought to be are not met at the end of the day. And unfortunately, there is an increase on the cost of waste management, much more than what's budgeted, which is of course not any organization, whether public or private, does not like when its budget is not met, of course. And regulatory complexity. It's true that sometimes hazardous waste are many times tend to, let's say, that they are more put on the industrial side, and we tend to forget. And sometimes because of the fact that they come from households, then they are not, let's say, treated in a regulatory point of view as hazardous waste, simply because the origin is household and not industry. That is something that sometimes is unclear, even for ourselves that are in the waste management sector. It is very clear, or at least clear enough, when the source is industrial, but when it's household, then things tend to be a little bit more disseminated and in a regulatory point of view, and that shouldn't be. At the end of the day, waste is waste. And if it's chemical, if it's dangerous, if it's hazardous. Doesn't matter whether it was produced in a flat or in a house, or in a factory, obviously. Key takeaways, just the last slide. We should, yeah. Is it okay, Jean-Paul? Yeah.
Yeah, just really wrap up very quickly.
Yeah, so it's a wrap up. So dedicated systems. So we definitely, household hazardous waste requires dedicated management systems. We've seen it. There should be prevention and segregation, because they are foundational to this sector, for the good management of household hazardous waste. Safety and training are not negotiable. Let's say it's part of everything. So therefore, they should be. That this is why we need dedicated systems. This is why we need prevention and segregation, etc. So that together with properly trained people managing or handling this waste, then they will do it. They will be able to do it in the safest way possible, and clear roles for authorities and operators. We said it at some point. We said that if we simplify the chain by households, then authorities in the middle and operators down the chain, there has to be clear roles for authorities and operators in this chain to make sure that this chain manages as good as well as possible. And then good management in general terms, in fact, not only for waste, but I mean, obviously this is what we are concerned today in this webinar, but good management is a shared responsibility between the three, let's say, main stakeholders in this chain: households as producers of the waste, authorities as the link between household and operators because they have the responsibility at the end to properly manage the waste, the household hazardous waste that they are receiving. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Gabriel, for setting the framework and the main principles behind the treatment of this waste stream. For the sake of time, I'll go straight to the next speaker to try and keep as much as we can for a bit of interaction also with the audience. Now we will go deeper then into some of the actual waste management operations that you touched upon, Gabriel, with then Clément Leveaux, Sales and Marketing Director at Veolia. Clément, take it away. You can take control.
Yes, good morning to everybody. First of all, sorry for my accent, and sorry if I hurt a little bit the language of Shakespeare, especially after Gabriel. Let's go just to introduce very briefly Veolia Hazardous Waste Europe, the new name of SARPI. We are we are the activity of Veolia in charge to manage, to treat, to recovery for the hazardous waste in Europe. We already think we have a mission as the expert on hazardous waste to support industries and territories, in this case, in the risk management of hazardous waste. I will insist a lot about this wording, risk management, because it's clearly the key point regarding the household hazardous waste. Very quickly, we have a very large and strong network of pre-treatment, treatment, and recovery facilities within all Europe. Presence in more than, not more today, presence in 10 countries. We have more than 110 facilities for treatment and recovery in these 10 countries. And we have more than 4,500 resources, I mean employees in charge to treat and to manage, to handle, to sort everything, the hazardous waste. We have a wide range of technologies and facilities in order to direct the flows in the best reliable treatment of recovery solutions. You can find just the portfolio in this slide. Of course, we have incineration lines with energy recovery. We have physical, chemical, and biological treatment, wastewater treatments. We are able to treat some mineral wastewater like acids. We have a lot of recovery solutions for solvent, for metals, for hydrocarbons, batteries, etc. We have a lot. That's the most important thing, I think, regarding the household hazardous waste. We have a lot of transfer station, platform, sortings. I don't know exactly the right word for that, but yeah, that's very important, especially after the discussion we have with Gabriel just previously. The sorting and the handling of household hazardous waste are key in the process of treatment. I wanted really to insist another time about the risk management, because it is really the crucial factor in our opinion in the household hazardous waste management. And we are, of course, thanks to the experience we have with industries, we are an expert in these specific points. And I want to highlight the fact that more than 10% of our employees are dedicated to analyze and to prevent the risks, not only for household hazardous waste, but it's a huge part. I want to highlight a little bit the difference between the business models regarding industrial as waste and household as waste. It's quite different. The first one regarding industrial as waste is really driven by technologies and capacities, capabilities, and the household hazardous waste model is more driven by service on reactivity you can to provide to our partners, municipalities, regions, etc. What you want. Yeah, in the first case, yeah, the waste flow is more oriented by large and liquid flows. The segregation, the analysis start at the industrial client level. We analyze an initial sample before to manage the different streams. And in fact, really, the driver is the technologies and the waste treatment technology you have, and the risk is, of course, the availability of treatment capacities. Some example, few example of waste streams we have with industries, and if you just are facing to the household hazardous waste now, service is key. In fact, it's a very low and dispersed waste flows. The segregation is not directly. You can have a first step, of course, at home, for example, of course, but in fact, that's a little bit what Gabriel explained previously. It's not fully respected. So in fact, the segregation is more at the second step. I mean, in the voluntary disposal, déchetterie, for example, in France. Collecting points, the different drop-off points you can have. And of course, it's not enough. It's just a part of the segregation. And our role, our mission is really to improve the segregation in our facilities. You have, I think it's a seasonability market. We know that regarding the bricolage you can do at home, the gardens, maintenance, etc. It's more in the warm period of the year, so you have a seasonability in the waste streams with this kind of hazardous waste. Really, the main driver is a service you can provide prior to the treatment steps. The main risk we notice is only the trivialization, because I think a lot of residents of consumers are not chemists. They are not reading clearly the composition of the different waste streams. So the risk is to consider this hazardous waste as non-hazardous waste. It's really crucial to educate and to train and to explain to the residents or consumers the risk they have regarding this kind of waste. You can have some on-site services. I mean, in the collecting points with dedicated staff, with communications, with training session, chemist interns, etc., etc. Off-site, that's in our facilities, we have a lot of operations, but I will describe more a little bit later. I want to share something regarding business models. Is what we can observe in the different European countries. You have three main different approaches or business model in the European markets. First one, maybe I'm not sure, but maybe typically French is a national approach. I mean a PRO, a producer responsible organism, EcoDDS in France, for example. You can have financial and or operational organism. That's the first case we have to face. The second one is really a regional. You can have some example in Germany, for example, or in Belgium and some other countries. It's a procurement joint association with public procurement rules, you are awarded by tender, but it's a purely a regional management. And the last three main approach we can see is very local municipal management of the household hazardous waste collecting points. In fact, these collecting points, the business model means voluntary contribution or selective collection in some in few countries. That's the first step of grouping and sorting of this hazard waste, and that's very important. The basic principle, and I think Gabriel highlighted a lot about that, hazardous waste must be not mixed with non-hazardous waste. That's the main principle for everybody to respect. In terms of risk, household hazardous waste are very heterogeneous, and you have a lot of different risks: flammable, toxic, corrosive, etc. Sources are very different. Chemicals like paints, solvents, some glues, for example. You have pesticides and fertilizers for garden. You have some automotive fluids like engine oils, for example. You have batteries. You have a lot of different sources of household hazardous waste. And you have a lot of difference regarding the physical appearance and the types of packaging you have to manage it. Cans, bottles, etc., etc. This is really the primary source of risk for citizens in the collection points, and for our staff. It's true that you have, especially in some countries, a lot of communication about the risk of household hazardous waste, but mostly as an operator, a pure player of treatment, we can see that in fact, when we received in drums or pallets the household hazardous waste, the sorting is absolutely not perfect, and we are facing to a lot of risk. I can mention as an example, and especially during the end of spring period of the year, we find a lot of chlorine tablets for swimming pool. It's a very dangerous product, and for our staff and for our facilities, it's a major risk of fire, for example. And we have, unfortunately, sometimes examples of fire in our facilities regarding household hazardous waste. So sorting is very key, and we have a lot of education, I think, and that's the role of a lot of associations and municipalities, really to highlight this point about the risk. What are the key factors now, and especially as a treatment recovery company? In these markets, really, the main gap and the critical process is between the drop-off or the collecting points and our treatment recovery facilities. That's really the critical track to manage this kind of waste. Of course, and I give you some example. The first step is really the containers you have to provide to the municipalities or to the collecting points. You have to manage the stock, and that's a critical point, because when you have this kind of seasonality, you have to manage different streams of containers. That's a critical point. Of course, you have to provide certified containers. I mean, United Nations, for example. That's the first step, and really, it's one of the complex point of the household hazardous waste management. Second one is really the transport. I mean, ADIR transport. As I guess a lot of you knows, it's a little bit complicated to recruit some drivers, ADIR drivers. and you have to manage each time the sustainability of this kind of waste. So that's a second point, very critical. In the middle, you have the sorting. For example, in our platforms or transfer stations, you have to dedicate a place for household hazardous waste with dedicated staff. It's sometimes completely compulsory regarding the market rules you have with your client. As I said just previously, you have a kind of unpredictable composition. You can find in our facilities, platforms, a lot of things with household hazardous waste. It's rare, but sometimes we can find, for example, ammunitions or grenades, or it's absolutely crazy to imagine what you can find in this container. So controlling and train staff, chemists, is, in our opinion, totally compulsory if you want to manage this kind of waste. After you have the pre-treatment processes, same, you have a lot of risks, especially in the shredding process. You have to prepare a little bit the waste in order to orient, to redirect to the right treatment process. And the quality of charge you have to prepare for the treatment recovery facility. And that's a very important thing. This process in this, logistical step is really to obtain a kind of massification, just to be the more efficient regarding the treatment facilities. And of course, you can have some other critical points. On this point is really the storage. You are limited in your facilities and your platforms about the storage of waste, and you have to manage that. And of course, because you have a transfer, you have to manage the other transfer as well. So for us, and in all this gap, on this process, you must have a complete traceability, and you have to be very efficient in terms of costs, because the main costs are already in this stage of the treatment of household hazardous waste. So logistical resources.
2 minutes, Clément. 2 minutes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
and service are the key factors if you want to redirect to the adapted treatment and recovery. Some drivers of outputs we want really to share with the audience is really to manage this kind of waste. You need to have really operational excellence in terms of risk management, of course, but you have to protect all the stakeholders. You have, of course, to prevent or to manage the risk, and you have to be very efficient in the cost control process. The client are very high level of requirements. You have a lot of not only regulatory, but you have a lot of administrative complexity to manage. You have a lot of reportings, a lot of KPIs to provide. So you need to have a lot of staff to manage all this stage of administrative and reporting process. You have to really to develop expertise in flow management. No trivialization. You have to really to redirect and to direct the streams to the right hazardous waste treatment processes or technologies, and no dilution. That's very important in our point of view. And we have, and that's very important, and maybe another time we can spend more time about this point. We focused on some improvement points. We think really that automation, especially regarding the sorting process, is key. We have some expectation with the AE to link with the automation in order to have a more safe sorting by this way. Education, training, communication about safety are very important on data management as well. That's 3 points we can highlight as areas of improvement. Just it's more a question for the debate is really the case. We have a very different situation regarding the different European countries in terms of capacities. For example, Italy is a full export country. They have not the capacities to treat hazardous waste in Italy. They have to export. So the question is, basically, it's a local market, a very local market. But probably, if we want to be more efficient, and that's what we expect to do, is really to pull a little bit the treatment and recovery capabilities in order to provide the best service to the client. So yeah, that's my conclusion, Jean-Paul.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Clément. And I think we've just gone a little bit deeper into hazardous waste management, and I think you opened a lot of insights for the audience on the risk management, because we know there are many hazards in this waste stream. Therefore, a risk needs to be managed. So again, for the sake of time, we'll jump straight to the next speaker. Here we see that Ireland is grayed out on this map. We're going to start putting a little bit more color on Ireland then with Richard. You can please go ahead, take control and give us a sense of how household hazardous waste is managed, treated in Ireland. Over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Jean-Paul, and thanks, Clément, for the expertise, the technical detail you're able to go through there. Look, a lot of the sentiments, a lot of the points that Clément and Gabriel, but particularly on the technical side and the challenges that we face across Europe in managing household hazardous waste, a lot of those technical points that Clément has made is the same from an Irish perspective. But I suppose the difference in Ireland is our densities, our volumes, and similar to Italy, the lack of hazardous waste treatment infrastructure, in particular final treatment infrastructure that we have. So look, for my presentation today, going to very briefly touch on ENVA as a business and our experience in household hazardous waste, very briefly touch on hazardous waste in general, talk you through how collection, how we process, in particularly focus on paint, the risks associated with paint, and particularly how both water-based and solvent-based paints are collected, managed, and potential for future collaboration and stuff as well. So look, ENVA is a leading provider of recycling and particular resource recovery solutions based across the UK and Ireland. As of now, we've approximately 42 facilities, approximately 2,000 employees, and both in the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and England, they are a mix of non-hazardous but predominantly hazardous treatment facilities that extend across oil recycling, wee recycling, battery recycling, physiochemical treatment, hazardous waste treatment, segregation, sorting, depacking, processing, whether we transform to produce materials that stay within the race regulations, or we bring materials straight back into to product status. So in Ireland alone, we've approximately 450 employees. And look, similar to the points that Clément was making, in the last 10 years especially, which I'll point to later, a lot of those employees have moved away from general operatives, more so towards technicians, engineers, scientists, and project managers that are basically on the ground delivering solutions and working out solutions for new waste streams across all the hazardous waste sector, one of which includes household hazardous waste. So we've 6 EPL licensed facilities in the Republic of Ireland. On the hazardous waste side, we've solid waste processing and treatment, focusing on solid non-regs, household hazardous waste, particularly our facility in Portlaoise, and garage waste. We have large capabilities for liquid waste processing across the UK and Ireland, but in particular in Ireland, where a lot of our liquid waste treatment processing capabilities can be used as we develop new solutions around processing of hazardous waste and the residues that can be generated as a result. On top of that, then we've hazardous soils treatment. We've our own certified laboratories, specialists in bulk hazardous waste exports out of Ireland all over Europe, which I'll kind of flag a bit later on. And across our facilities, basically, especially considering the Irish context and the squeeze that we have on capacity and stuff. We're basically that intermediaries. A lot of the time, we're that service provider that can accept materials, source, segregate, transform, whether it be future recycling or recovery in Ireland, or export to other destinations around Europe. So look, very, very, very high level hazardous and household hazardous waste in Ireland. So at very general level, I think we're similar enough to the majority of Europe. We're generating about 5 to 7 kgs of household waste per household in Ireland. And look, especially from an ENVA perspective on what we do across our household hazardous waste collections, the majority of streams are paint, low-level solvents, adhesives, pesticides, herbicides, batteries, cleaning chemicals, some waste oils, fluorescent tubes, and the absolute myriad of contamination that can go with or can conceivably be put into packages or put into containers that may have even previously contained any of those types of materials. So collection infrastructure in Ireland is mainly across civic community sites, which are local authority operated, and the operation is either contained within the local authority or subbed out to third-party contractors to operate on the local authority's behalf. And whether it's directly with the local authority or through a nominated subcontractor, the majority of the time, ENVA is the partner to take away the household hazardous waste streams that are generated at the civic community sites, the majority of which is usually either contaminated packaging or paint waste. On top of the civic community site network, there's also mobile household hazardous waste collection days organised by the local authorities. This gives people an opportunity to come and drop off household hazardous waste. Again, the majority of which is usually paint, but there's a weird and wide selection of contamination that could be included in that, which I'll get to later. Our experience in the sector is over 25 years, whether it be collecting from civic community sites just with our own containers, or organising, managing and marketing household hazardous waste collection days. And we also would do farm hazardous waste collection days as well, which is similar in setup, much more wide and varied in terms of the type of waste that can be produced and can be brought forward to us for collection, but similar-ish in terms of risk profile and how that material needs to be managed going forward. So based on 2023 data, look, very broadly speaking, Ireland is generating about 380,000 tonnes of hazardous waste, within which is about 190 treated within our own facilities, and the same, about 190 exported also. In terms of household waste generation, what we see ourselves, roughly about 1,200 tonnes of portable and smaller dry cell or lead acid batteries, about 3,000 tonnes of waste oil. Sometimes that figure can be skewed a bit. It can include some industrial oils as well. And likewise then for paint and solvents, very, very seasonal, very, very based on progression of the economy, but we're in and around 3,000 to 4,500 tonnes per annum. I think we're just finalising data at the moment, and the 2025 figure for ENVA will be somewhere around 3,600 to 3,800 tonnes. And then fluorescent lamps as well, mainly collected under the schemes. So look, the main challenges in managing household hazardous waste in Ireland, obviously we're quite over-reliant on export of hazardous waste for treatment. I have some data later that will show, particularly ENVA's business, we've made a lot of progress there in developing people and infrastructure, but all too often we're still reliant on export. This couples in with our domestic treatment and recovery capacity. We're operating on a basis right now where we have civic community site collections, and then as I said, also our household hazardous waste collection days, which are probably too infrequent and need to be expanded on, which we can look at later. Data gaps and the availability of concise, up-to-date reporting. Household hazardous waste is a stream that evolves very, very quickly, which a lot of waste operators have particularly seen with the prevalence of lithium-ion batteries and stuff, and how all that has progressed. So the need for up-to-date data is definitely a challenge in how we progress infrastructure development and treatment capacity in Ireland over the next few years. Legacy contaminated sites and emerging hazardous waste types. This, for other countries, this may not be a particular challenge for household hazardous waste. it is in Ireland, because a lot of the facilities that we use to source or treat hazardous waste are also integrated treatment facilities that take in other hazardous waste also. So as the market changes and more priority may be given to other emerging hazardous waste types, it may take away treatment capacity, it may take away expertise, and probably of most importance, it may take away focus from developing the solutions that are needed for household hazardous waste. So the other, not so much of an issue in Central Europe, where you maybe have larger dedicated facilities for particular types of hazardous waste, but particularly for Ireland, when you have integrated facilities, other priorities can take the focus that's needed to solve the future problems around household has. Compliance and enforcement challenges are the same all over Europe. Need to align haz waste to climate and circular economy goals, especially as green procurement and green infrastructure development is coming more and more. How we align all that and still deliver a commercially attractive solution and compliant solution for customers is a challenge. Skills and training shortages, I think no one, as Clément highlighted earlier, the need for skilled people and the security in us as operators being able to invest in developing skilled people and retain them for the period of time that's needed. And last thing, probably of most importance, public awareness and poor segregation presents real challenges. So look, collection and transportation in Ireland, relatively straightforward. Not going to spend too much long here, as I've already mentioned there. Civic community sites, mobile household hazardous waste collection days, some retail take back for batteries and WEEs, and then on occasion as well, specialist contractors going in where there's particular requirements in larger household facilities and stuff. All gives us the collection infrastructure that we need and reception and interim storage to enable us to collect household hazardous waste. So the key features of this model is it's mainly public drop-off, where primary source segregation from the generator is provided by householders who are untrained, unskilled, very little knowledge of the risk and of the control measures that need to be taken. And a lot of it is relying on local authority infrastructure or local authority personnel to implement schemes and prioritize schemes. Transport and requirements are the same as there would be across Europe. So it's ADR compliance and drivers alike, UN approved, packaging, waste collection permit, hazardous waste consignment notes, and in particular, putting all that provision in place, knowing the inherent risks that are within these streams, as I'll flag in a couple of slides' time. So operational challenges, okay, quality of the material that we accept, in particular for us in terms of commercially how we manage these projects, and the often small and inconsistent volumes that we can get, whether it be at different civic community sites or at different household hazardous waste collection days, which can be taken in areas with far varying levels of population density and stuff. So it can be quite up and down. And as Clément pointed out earlier as well, the generation of volume can be quite seasonal and stuff as well. Because of all that, very high transport costs, management costs, personnel costs, the need for the competent operatives and drivers, and in particular, within all of that, how we manage historical waste and contamination that may be present in the streams that we're asked to manage. So just very, very briefly, I just thought it was an interesting point to put in, and apologies, the tables there are a little bit small, but the vital role that I suppose that social media and awareness and advertising plays in people being aware of events like household hazardous waste collection days is probably the main opportunity in Ireland for householders to dispose of not their standard household hazardous waste, their pesticides and stuff. And the vast majority of the awareness around those events is via social media. We know social media is cheap, but it requires regular, up-to-date content, and it really requires ownership from those who want to publicize events and stuff. But the vast majority of people that are attending household hazardous waste collection days, they're finding out about those events via social media, and in particular, they're all the vast majority are within a quite short distance away from where those collections are taking place. So almost 60% are within 10 kilometers as to where the collections are taking place. So whether by civic immunity or from hazardous waste collection days, once the material arrives at a facility for treatment and recovery, we will receive, we will sort, we will pre-treat, and we will recover as much as possible. Again, there's ever-increasing complexities around the incoming waste composition, and along with that, then the safety and the regulatory requirements about how we process and what our offtake partners, how they want material presented and how they want it composed and stuff. So all that put together, it's put more strain on treatment infrastructure, but particularly expertise, and what expertise we need to develop in our business to ensure we remain compliant in 18 to 24 months. You know what I mean? So investment is continual. In Ireland, contracts are relatively short, so it's very often it makes it more difficult for us as operators to go and invest in higher end process plant and equipment that maybe have better offtake, more secure offtake. But it's just a challenge that will look to remain in the process. So look, as a result of the investments, as a result of the innovations that we've made in the last 10 years, it has reduced greatly our reliance on the export of household hazardous waste, especially considering commercial, technical, and sustainability challenges that need to be overcome, particularly for the last few streams that are still being exported out of Ireland. So look, the next step in terms of where we're going and how we manage these streams is putting in the infrastructure, the expertise that are needed to have those circular solutions of the future. The reality that needs to be lived up to by municipalities and operators is these solutions will not be cheaper. They will not be less risk for operators, and they will not be cheaper, but they have longer term benefits that will deliver value in the futures. So
2 minutes or so, Richard. Thanks.
That was quick, John Paul. So look, we all know that there are future barriers to export. Our reliance on export, whether it be around Europe or off in Ireland, they're ever present. They're kind of listed there. The ever stricter EU waste shipping regs, in particular, what we're seeing in Ireland is the reluctance of shippers and exporters to take hazardous waste, and especially waste streams that may be sourced from household hazardous waste streams, because their awareness of the level of risk and the level of future contamination. So this is just an important slide to look at kind of where we were as a business 10 years ago versus where we are now. And you'll see in 2015 there, the vast majority, everything aside from waste oil, we were exporting to destinations around Europe. Very, very straightforward operation to manage at the time, easy to secure. TFSs, capacity was available, and the technical expertise could be spread out over much larger volumes because they were quite straightforward volume to move with just a simple packing requirement. When we now look at 2025 and the infrastructure that we developed and the treatment capacity that we have developed here, all our paint is now being segregated, deep packed, tested, physicochemical treatment for contaminated water-based, solvents are being fuel bended, all packaging is being recycled and then extruded back to product, back to bead for onward sale. And likewise then as we go down along. So in order, like, these better solutions give us more capacity, they reduce our capacity risk in terms of exports, but they give us far more operational risk within our own facility and make us as an operator far more reliant on the technical expertise that we're developing in our business. So quick, just focus on paint. Paint is a massive stream in Ireland in terms of household hazardous waste and how we manage it. It's about 3,000 to 4,500 tons a year. It all comes in as mixed hazardous waste, so it's all delivered into ENVA as within containers where there can be water or water-based paint or solvent-based paint. And look, I suppose, as Clément mentioned earlier about contamination, the most important thing here is like the volume that we accept and segregate and have to sort every day. The range of contamination within household waste is very, very wide and varied. There can be batteries, there can be food, there could be poisons, there could be spent ammunition, or on occasion unspent ammunition, sharps, oils, low flash point liquids, you name it, and that's the level of contamination that you're dealing with within paint waste in particular. It's important to mention in Ireland the social enterprise initiatives that are focusing on reusing paint and getting good quality water-based paints from the household waste stream and reusing those. They're doing a very, very valuable service in terms of raising awareness, providing training, undertaking research, and doing that education job that's needed around public awareness. These initiatives aren't going to be available to take very high volumes in the future. They're just not scalable, but they're doing a great service in raising awareness. Barriers to us for future better solutions for paint in particular is there's currently no end of waste criteria for waste paint, and it's something that if local authorities want to push ahead with and want to develop that solution, it requires input from all stakeholders, because the source material, they need to be better educated, they need to understand sorting, they need to understand contamination to have better input materials so we can develop solutions further. So look, very, very high level in terms of summary. We've went down to the list. Public awareness here is key, and that engagement with all the stakeholders to provide those better solutions going forward. There is an expansion needed of the household hazardous waste collections across Ireland, especially when you look at the data and you see the proximity with which householders are attending household hazardous waste collections day. And in 2025, I think it was 12 in total collection days that were undertaken. So it needs to be expanded along with those public awareness campaigns where social media channels will give the best bang for buck. Acceptance procedures, stakeholder engagement, and look, I say, operators, industry players, we are ready to invest in infrastructure, but more importantly, we're ready to invest in people and their technical capabilities once we have secure long-term supply, can understand the quality material and the awareness campaigns that will be support or input. And by putting in place collaborative partnerships, we can then secure offtake and have that more sustainable solution in place. You know what I mean? So quick overview, very efficient, the end of the way, but look, hopefully there's questions afterwards. So that's me.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a lot, Richard. I mean, it's normal. It's difficult to get all of this into, 10, 15 minutes. I'm fully aware of that, but we do like to try and keep some time for questions. So maybe we can bring on Clément and Gabriel and, just open the floor. If you would like to raise a question with our speakers, literally raise your hand and we can bring you on and you can turn on your camera and microphone. One thing that you've all mentioned is the importance of training, right? And essentially what you're saying is we need chemists, right? Not just in the development of products and substances, but also then in the management of the waste. What are some of the concrete steps that you're taking as an industry to try and support that training, let's say at the level of, collectors, municipalities, those managing the very direct collection points? I'm not yet talking about citizens, but rather on the collection side. Are you providing some level of training, or are there some sort of specific minimum requirements that are established for municipality personnel, whether that's in Ireland or elsewhere? Who would like to have a go at answering that one? Maybe Clément first?
Yeah, absolutely. It's right. Like I guess all of us, we just highlight this point about education. Training is are absolutely key, and of course we are providing this kind of service, awareness to the municipal partners, and but in fact, I tried to explain a little bit in my presentation. We have a kind of transfer of expertise to our staff, and finally, a lot of requests from our partners or clients is more to manage all the process of house, not directly at home of the citizens, of course, but we have to manage more and more to enlarge our responsibility, our expertise, our staff, our knowledge, but directly by our staff, in fact. And of course, we have to transfer this knowledge, but more and more the request is to put more service, in fact.
Mm-hmm. Richie, would you have? Yep.
Yeah, very similar to Clément there. So like we have provided training in the past to local authorities and municipality staff where we see we get the best bang for our buck. We reduce our risk and we get better quality waste coming in is when we more so invest in our people on the ground, in our drivers, in our project managers, in particular the people who are working on client facilities, doing the daily, the weekly collections, and like through that, sounds cliche, but through that spirit of partnership, also as part of day-to-day communications, as opposed to doing procedures and signing off on PowerPoints and getting names on paper, it's that we just enforce that culture of best practice. But we can only do that when we're 100% sure we have the right people going to customer sites who have the right training and stuff. And that's how we find best pays off. It's very, very difficult for every operator, I feel, right now, because as an industry to retain the right people, to retain the right technical people, and that includes drivers and that includes people handling bins, is very difficult right now. But we need to do it. We need to invest in those. Then we find that whole educational process of clients and people on the ground is a lot more straightforward. And overall, the culture in just the culture of compliance and better presentation of what we need to collect improves tenfold. So
what we see is that it's a big risk even when we're in a hazardous waste management situation, right? So there are hazards that represent big risks. I'm wondering, Gabriel, what happens when citizens do not separately collect from the start and you get household hazardous waste in, let's say, mixed waste, right? Residual waste. Is there any chance that household hazardous waste can still find its way then to a hazardous waste management treatment plant? Or does it represent in mixed waste an even bigger risk, actually? And how does one deal with that on the waste management side?
Well, thank you, Jean-Paul. Long story short, you're going to have two scenarios. You're going to have one scenario in which, unfortunately, this is the household hazardous waste is going to be mixed in with other waste streams, as you were stating yourself, and then it's going to be handled and treated in a wrong installation, which is going to by volume, but that's a very negative thing, what I'm saying. By volume is just going to swallow it, if you see what I mean. But that's the wrong way to manage it and to treat it. Meaning, for instance, some has waste ending up going to worst case scenario, going to municipal waste landfill, for instance, where definitely it shouldn't go, or a little bit less worse, but still bad, going maybe to a municipal waste incinerator, where the off-gas treatment, meaning that the treatment of the emissions is not at the same standard than a proper high temperature incinerator. So that will be one scenario. The other scenario, which is maybe more positive on the waste management side, but not positive overall because it increases the cost a lot, is it's going to be seen. It's going to be identified, it's going to be then separated, and then it will have another transport, let's say, transport route, and then it will be sent to the right installation, which will then, as I tried to say in the presentation, what ends up happening is we end up managing it properly, but with an increasing, with an important cost increase, and therefore then, and this is what a lot of sometimes households do not understand or do not realize, is that, you know, I mean, I'm just going to put very simple. A municipality states that the budget for 2026 is 100 for everything related to this part, and it ends up being, unfortunately, 125 or 130, and obviously those 30% more than what was budgeted needs to be paid one way or another, and which means, well, less grants for, I don't know, for nursery schools or whatever, you know, it's going to take money out of the rest. And so neither things that I explain are good. Therefore, we go back to the main point, which is if it is correctly segregated at source and separated, then the whole chain is much smoother, safer, and more economical.
And so we have this obligation at EU level. I'm just wondering, is it enough? Because you've all mentioned the importance of characterizing the household hazardous waste. It's probably a lot more heterogeneous than the industrial hazardous waste, which will be in much larger quantities, but much more homogeneous in its characterization. So do you in fact require a lot more than separate collection? I mean, do you in fact require something that's highly segregated, fraction per fraction, and is that then, you know, manageable on the collection side? Clément or Richie, maybe?
I can start. Yeah, and I can link with what just Gabriel and Richard mentioned previously. It's really the cost acceptance. In fact, it's not a regular waste. We want to have more segregation. We have less risks. In fact, it's more and more cost, and that's a critical point. So, of course, what we can see from our partners is really they want to have more and more segregation, more and more characterization, more and more knowledge reporting. I mean, so that's it. That's it. And I have no example of a situation where the partner asks for less services or poor services. So no, the trend is really to accelerate on this point, but the limit is, of course, I think the cost structure. That's very important.
Richie, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think the same. Like, definitely to echo Clément's point there. That is it's largely a function of cost. Like, more training, more technical expertise, more skilled expertise, and having that technical expertise on the sites to have more segregation when material is presented. It is a question of risk for the municipalities or for the local authorities as well, because by the local authorities, whether it be subcontracting in the technical expertise or providing it themselves, they are taking on a greater amount of risk in terms of their ownership of the material as well. So it will be extra cost, it will be additional ownership and of the waste, and the risk that accompanies that as well. And there's no question it's coming down the line. I don't think the realization is fully there as to what will be needed to fully implement, but the benefits, albeit won't be within 12 to 18 months, but longer term, the benefits are there in terms of ensuring capacity is available and longer term cost and safety benefits as well when this is done right at source, and industry is there to support as much as possible.
So you also all mentioned regulatory complexity, and I don't want to get into too much of that in the last 3 or 4 minutes that we have, but I do want to touch upon the issue of cross-border movement, and maybe Richie, just as a quick follow-up. So obviously you said you were quite export reliant, but you're still making steps and investments in Ireland to manage the waste as much as you can there. But what does a kind of a European strategy look like? I mean, should there be a lot more cross-border movement of household hazardous waste and making best use of current installations? Or do you think that, you know, every country in a sort of a sovereign way should go about trying to deal with its household hazardous waste in the most local way possible? Like, just, can you give us a sense of what should be the direction of travel according to you? Richard first, and then Gabriel and Clément.
According to me, Grant, that's the best way to put it. Look, Ireland is from an Enbridge perspective and from an Irish perspective, considering the volumes, our population density, our availability of facilities right now, Republic of Ireland right now should be able to manage their own volumes and treat them all within our own borders. You know what I mean? It needs that stakeholder engagement to develop existing facilities and developing permissions and security of contracts to go and develop infrastructure across Europe. That's for my colleague, for Clément and stuff to comment on, but definitely for Ireland, I don't see a need where if we collaborate and work together to develop what infrastructure is there now, we should largely be able to meet what's required to manage our hazardous waste on site. That gets difficult though for household hazardous waste, not putting a caveat there, but especially when like a portion of what we collect, although it falls outside waste regulations per se, but comes back to kind of low level radioactives and stuff as well, which is very, very, very difficult to manage in Ireland right now. You know what I mean? But for the vast majority of the tonnages that we're talking for household hazardous waste, we should be able to develop that infrastructure ourselves now and reduce our lines on export. Yeah, 100%.
Okay, thanks. Clément, do you want to have a first go, and then Gabriel?
Yeah, I understand completely this point of view, but I think in the real life a little bit. I think that's it's very expensive to invest in some new infrastructures, incineration of course, but not only, recovery mostly. It's a lot of money to drive and to promote in each country, and I think regarding some treatment facilities, it could be more efficient to think sometimes at the European level, and to a little bit share the capacities, the capabilities, within Europe, and because I'm truly convinced that I don't see the public money to spread in order to build some new infrastructures. That's really my deep thinking.
Okay, thank you. Gabriel, you want to add to that?
Well, trying to keep it simple and evading any, let's say, political background on the comment, and making it as practical as possible. I would tend to say that I understand Richard's point of view, but I would, let's say, simplify it as follows. The simpler is the hazardous waste, meaning that it can be, let's say, at least it can have a partial pre-treatment. So there should be a certain level of autonomy in each country. That I agree, and obviously related with a lower investment. So simpler pre-treatment, preparing, concentrating waste, and making it more complicated, but concentrating it. That makes sense, and all countries again should be autonomous on that. And some of them in Europe, in fact, are still not today, by the way, and that's a problem. But then, using what Clément said, I fully agree. Whenever and putting it again simple, whenever the waste is more complicated and therefore it needs more expensive and difficult infrastructure to operate, then it cannot be just the country philosophy. It has to be the whole continent philosophy and geography. Because you're talking about installations that are 150 million euros easily, or more. Then we have an important. Let's not forget that to build an installation, it takes at least 3, 5, 6 years. Whenever you found the place where you can build it, which also sometimes take many years, because the philosophy of a lot of the society is not in my backyard, so we need it, but I don't want it here. Put it somewhere else. So, but at the end of the day, you have to put it somewhere. So, and if everyone says not in my backyard, well, where do we put it? So it takes a long time to be able to find a site where you can build such an infrastructure. It takes a lot of money, etc. So at the end of the day, it's projects that are 6, 8, 10 years, 12 years since the first day they were conceived or thought. So again, simple waste, yeah, country. The more difficult waste and therefore more expensive infrastructure, the whole continent.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I mean, I think that provides a good balance. I mean, I didn't personally too much want to pitch, the national versus the European level, although it's great fun politically to do that. But I think you pitched it right. If I could rephrase, maybe there's a mandatory separate collection on household hazardous waste. for every EU member state. What you're saying is there could also be a sort of mandatory pre-treatment phase as well, so that, you know, what could be moving across borders is already something that's highly characterized, and that we know exactly the final outcome that waste will get, a sort of preparation for recovery, if you like. Okay, wonderful. Gabriel, Clément, Richard, thank you so much for your time, all the preparation, the slides. There was a lot of content in there that will all be made available, obviously, to the audience, but then also will be made public as well. So thank you so much for having been part of this workshop. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much. And so with that, we wrap up. I wasn't able to pick up all the questions, especially the ones related to communication. We know that there's a lot of work to be done on education and awareness raising. We'll have a dedicated workshop on citizen communications next time. That's where we will be taking those questions and going a bit deeper onto those topics. Apologies, we had to shorten a little bit the discussion, but you know. Content is king, right? And hopefully that was interesting for you, and looking forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.